Hello, my name is Maggie Massey. I'm a senior environmental scientist specialist working on CDFW's Cannabis Restoration Grant Program, and here to provide a general update and overview on the grant program. I'll start with some background and highlights of cannabis regulations in California. In 1996, California became the first state to legalize medical marijuana with the approval of Proposition 215. This legalized the use, possession, and cultivation of cannabis by patients with a physician's recommendation. Then in 2003, Senate Bill 420 was passed and offered clarification and guidance to Prop 215, and also established the California Medical Marijuana Program. Then in the latter part of 2015 and into 2016, two different Senate bills were passed. Language in Senate Bill 643 guided the Department of Food and Agriculture in consultation with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the State Water Resource Control Board to ensure that individual and cumulative effects of water diversion and discharge associated with cultivation did not impact the in-stream flows for fish and maintain natural flow variability. Then in June 2016, through Senate Bill 837, this built upon the requirement to enter into a lake or streambed alteration agreement with CDFW for activities authorized by a license or renewed license for cannabis cultivation. And it also opened up different options for entities seeking a lake or streambed alteration agreement and license. In November 2016, Proposition 64 legalized specified personal use and cultivation of marijuana for adults 21 years of age or older. It reduced or dismissed criminal penalties for specified marijuana-related offenses for adults and juveniles, and the proposition included provisions on regulations, licensing, and taxation of legalized use. In 2017, Senate Bill 94 was passed, and it merged California's marijuana laws into a single regulatory system for medical and non-medical commercial cannabis businesses. There was also the passing of Assembly Bill 133, which complemented Prop 64 to provide new minor but substantive rules for commercial licensees, business owners, as well as recreational growers. Specifically for CDFW's cannabis program development, starting in 2014-2015 through legislation, CDFW specifically established formal positions to focus on preventing environmental damage caused by cannabis cultivation. In the following year, through passage of numerous Assembly and Senate bills, standards were established for cannabis cultivation to protect and mitigate impacts to the environment, adding to CDFW's involvement. Then, after passing of Prop 64, CDFW was established as part of the state's licensing procedure for cannabis, so that each licensee would need to go to CDFW for a lake or streambed alteration agreement or verification. One was not needed. Then, starting in fiscal year 2019-2020, through the Cannabis Taxation Fund defined in the Revenue and Taxation Code, Section 34019F2, it created a dedicated funding source that is continuous appropriation to focus for the first 5 years on the cleanup, remediation, and restoration of environmental damage in watersheds affected by cannabis cultivation and related activities. So through this dedicated funding source, it is helping support current efforts and components of CDFW's cannabis program, but is also making it possible for additional program build-out and development throughout the state. Current efforts in part of the cannabis program include permitting and environmental review, where staff work with annual cultivation license applicants and temporary licensees in obtaining and submitting a lake or streambed alteration agreement. For written verification, a lake or streambed alteration agreement is not required. There's also outreach, which is statewide and facilitates education and relationships. There's also the Cannabis Lands Program, which is responsible to steward CDFW and partner-owned and managed lands in a manner that discourages and prevents cannabis production and other illegal cannabis activities on these lands. Enforcement is also part of the cannabis program, and these efforts support the legal market by removing illegal cannabis from the state and federal lands. There's also monitoring, and this is working to establish a framework to employ long-term science-based monitoring and assessments to better understand the potential impacts of cannabis cultivation on California's fish and wildlife. And there's the grant program, which is what the rest of the presentation will focus on. And this continued appropriation is helping the redevelopment of the Cannabis Restoration Grant Program. So some background on the grant program. In 2017, Assembly Bill 243 directed CDFW to restore watersheds impacted by cannabis cultivation in key areas of coastal Northern California. Through this one-time solicitation, CDFW awarded $1.3 million to support 4 restoration projects. 2 of the awarded grants were to the Eel River Watershed Improvement Group. In total, 12 trespass cannabis cultivation sites were cleaned up, 6 in the Bull Creek watershed and 6 in the South Fork Usal Creek watershed. All cultivation infrastructure, toxins, and trash were removed from the sites. In total, approximately 8,000 pounds of refuse was removed, including over 4 miles of pipe and almost 2 gallons of liquid hazardous waste. Additionally, 2 illegal water diversions were removed from Bull Creek. Another grant awarded was to Sanctuary Forest, which worked on restoring a riparian zone of the Upper Mattole River. The project removed approximately 50,000 pounds of garbage and hazardous waste from the property. And the pictures here are the refuse and irrigation piping removed and organized for helicopter removal from the Bull Creek watershed. The 4th grant awarded was to Integral Ecology Research Center. The project resulted in the removal of 97% of all refuse and infrastructure at over 100 illegal cannabis sites on public lands. The restoration included the removal of over 148,000 pounds of refuse, including 727,000 feet of irrigation pipe. Additionally, any illegal reservoirs found were removed and ranged in storage capacity from 100 to over 30,000 gallons. Evidence of pesticides and fertilizer were found at nearly every site, and approximately 1,000 pounds of concentrated pesticide were removed, and 83,000 pounds of fertilizer were removed. In the picture here, top and bottom left show before and after cleanup efforts on a trespass grow, and right is irrigation piping being removed by helicopter by a trespass grow in the northwest portion of California. The next granting effort occurred in 2020, and this was a one-time funding from the tax fund dollars to address limiting factors in the Eel River watershed, which has been impacted by illegal cannabis cultivation. Currently, in 2021, through the Environmental Restoration and Protection Account pursuant of Revenue and Taxation Code Section 34019F2, the Cannabis Grant Program is in redevelopment and will be focusing on partnerships for the cleanup, remediation, and restoration of sites affected by cannabis cultivation and related activities. So when we started this process of redeveloping the grant program, our main goal was to listen and hear where the most immediate need was for funding, in addition to what some of the greatest limiting factors are between cannabis cultivation and environmental stewardship and sustainability. This launched many great conversations to collaborate with different organizations, ranging from nonprofits, cannabis industry advocates, private consultants, and other public agencies, and even internal discussions within CDFW and the Cannabis Program. Through these discussions with the different entities, there are reoccurring needs and limiting factors identified, and we use these to not only guide our funding priorities, but also see where we can enhance our granting opportunities. And so our funding priorities are the cleanup and remediation of illicit cannabis cultivation impacts on public lands, watershed or community enhancements where cannabis cultivation occurs, and support qualified growers and support environmentally sustainable practices. The first 2 priorities are part of the current proposal solicitation notice we are working on, called the Watershed Remediation and Enhancement Grant Opportunity. It is a competitive grant program with the anticipated award amount of up to $2 million. Eligibility under this solicitation is defined by Fish and Game Code Section 1501.5B, where we'll award funds to federal, state, and local public agencies, nonprofit organizations, and California Native American tribes. And as I said before, the solicitation will focus on the priority of cleanup and remediation of illicit cannabis impacts on qualified public lands, which may include lands owned by eligible entities, And the second priority being watershed or community enhancements where cannabis cultivation occurs. Cleanup and remediation projects will aim at reducing the delivery of environmental contaminants into the environment by removing refuse and infrastructure associated with illegal cannabis cultivation in upland habitats or within the riparian and stream area. The second priority will focus on either road treatments, which are necessary due to the cannabis cultivation activities, and this can include road upgrading, road decommissioning, culvert or road crossing upgrades, and other sediment prevention delivery actions. Or a project type will be wildlife enhancements, and this is preventing accidental injury or death, poisoning prevention, limiting human disturbance to wildlife, minimizing the spread of invasive species, and enhancing native habitat and habitat connectivity. And so with this solicitation, we are in the final draft stages and about ready to release a draft solicitation for public review and anticipate a final solicitation release in March or April. The second grant solicitation we're working on, which is still in development, comes from the idea of helping qualified growers to get an annual license and encouraging environmental sustainability. With this grant opportunity, we're aiming to have it be non-competitive, where we can have a concept phase submitted by applicants and be able to work with them more openly than with a competitive grant program. The anticipated award amount is also up to $2 million. As of now, eligible applicants again would be defined by Fish and Game Code section 1501.5B, where eligible applicants would be public agencies, nonprofit organizations, and California Native American tribes. And we're aiming for the applicants to represent qualified small growers, and some current ideas to define them as small operators who are engaged in sustainable cultivation practices, or possibly use definitions outlined by the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and perhaps prioritized by equity considerations. We would also be aiming for a minimum requirement of having at least a provisional license. And we are shooting for a solicitation release for summer of this year. And with that, I would like to say thank you. We are really excited for these opportunities and to fund some great projects. I encourage everyone to please go to our webpage to look for our first draft solicitation for public review and for announcements regarding deadlines and dates for workshops. And if you have any questions, please email us at cangrantprogram@wildlife.ca.gov. Thank you.